on if you're like on iTunes, podcasts, whatever. I
Yeah.
always cut that portion out because I always start with like welcome to like this.
Well, I think I typically try to do it again at the end.
Yeah. But I guess like the front portion never gets into it because then you know what I mean? Like we always start with like who introduces the episode and you're like welcome to episode like number whatever. We have our guest and then like I started at that point in time. So all like whatever is said before that gets cut out.
I
Keep that in
think
mind, I
the
guess like
well, I think the goal is to talk about it twice. So I always tell people like the front end portion of this is just us kind of like letting everyone get in, which is what we're doing now to all the six people that we are live with. Welcome back everyone to episode 11. As we let some folks filter in because we're somehow minutes early, which is like minutes earlier than we normally are. As everyone knows, I got some community announcements that I will go through. If you didn't catch it, Vlad's saying that he cuts this part off for the podcast when it goes out. If you guys are watching, please remember to hit the like, comment, subscribe buttons. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to Solus PLC. We're getting close to 20,000 subscribers, which is very exciting. It's all 100% Vlad, but I feel like yeah, we can put Vlad over. So if you guys are watching somewhere else, subscribe to Solus PLC. Help us push Vlad over the top. And then if you're on LinkedIn, please follow and like the Manufacturing Hub with Dave and Vlad page, which is what you guys are watching this now. We're also live on manufacturinghub.live, which is where you can catch all of the back episodes. As I said, this is kind of the community segment as we're letting people come in. So if you have some updates that you'd like to send, please send them in. I know we talk about this most weeks. So the Alberta Tech Open Oil Field Clubhouse is having their next event tomorrow, April 29th at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Everyone can do their own conversions to that. And they're actually going to be talking software containers and how to use that in industrial automation. And Sean Terrell is leading that. And Vlad, I don't know if you got tagged in Mark's post and saw that, but I think it'll be an interesting episode.
I thought Sean was talking about that 2 weeks ago, but I guess maybe I'm not keeping track of that schedule. I need to.
I looked moments before we went live to confirm that
Okay, perfect.
that I got the day and date right, and I think Mark had tagged me in a post earlier this week. Don't know
Good.
I don't know if schedule will allow me to get in there. And then what else? So again, we are going into the kind of talking everything talent landscape. And so we're going into the talking everything talent landscape, and this is the first episode of this week. And we have our special guest, Jordan Humphreys, who we will appropriately introduce in a couple of moments. Vlad, did you have any other thoughts before we jump in to the early crowd?
No, I just think like based on one of our previous guests, I wanted to mention that there are some potential interesting things coming up. I don't want to spoil the surprise yet, but if you've been following the manufacturing hub for a while, you probably have an idea of what I'm talking about. We do have some essentially giveaways on the line, but all the details will be revealed in due time. Hopefully, he'll come back on the show and make that announcement himself. And so stay tuned and make sure to check us out every week on Wednesdays.
Absolutely perfect. So Vlad, as we ask before we always get into this like semi-professional podcasting section, do you want to kick us off, or should I kick us off?
Sure, I'll do it. So welcome everyone. This is episode number 11 of the Manufacturing Hub. This month's theme is talent. So we're going to be talking with different individuals about the topic of talent. Today we've got Jordan Humphreys with us, and he's essentially a recruiting specialist who works with a lot of the automation people that we're all connected with, a lot of different companies. And so we wanted to explore the topic of talent with him as the expert in this domain. And so Jordan, if you could introduce yourself a little bit, talk about yourself, but also the company that you're currently have founded and are working for. What do you do? How do people maybe reach out to you as well. What kind of services do you offer, both, for corporate recruiters or corporations in general, and for individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks you guys for having me on the show. It's great to be here. Love what you guys have done so far, and hopefully I can add some value here on the talent side. So introduction, 2015, I started in recruiting. Nobody gets into recruiting on purpose. It's kind of the joke us recruiters have. We all kind of fall into it one way or another. I had always enjoyed working with people, had an opportunity to join a team that was being built here in Indianapolis. So I got in what was called a sourcer position. So basically I'm just sourcing candidates for the recruiters, good fits for possible jobs. That's where actually my first role I was helping on was for a PLC engineer at an airport here in Indianapolis. And I remember, sitting down with the recruiter, and I said, you're going to look for PLC guys. I looked at it and said, what's a PLC? And he kind of had that thought. He looked in his eyes like, oh boy, here we go. So it was kind of my introduction. And it didn't take long. And I knew I wanted to be a recruiter, wanted to be in this, work my way up. And so in that process, found a couple of different job avenues, trying to find my niche, so to speak. Was in healthcare, did a little bit in life sciences, but then I did a little bit in technology, which led me to, in 2018, joined a practice that was trying to grow their automation and controls side. So I had said, I had done a little bit of that before, know my way around a few of those conversations. So we came to an agreement that that's what we were going to try and do. And that's where it really took off for me. One of the big things was, as a recruiter, normally you have job boards that will aid you, Dice, Career Builder, Monster, you name it. But at this one, I only had LinkedIn. So at that point, I didn't have LinkedIn, but maybe a couple of hundred connections, didn't really use it all that much, didn't really know. So at that point, it was like, hey, I got to jump in and get good at this. So I knew a little bit about LinkedIn, knew I needed to build kind of a community, a network, so to speak. I had seen recruiters on LinkedIn before. And always, being in sales, the thing that's pounded into your head is don't be like everybody else. Don't sound like everybody else. So I looked at the approach that was going on in LinkedIn and how recruiters were using it. I looked at other people and how they were using it and being successful, whether it was business to business, corp to corp, selling to retail. So I tried to mash those in together and build a network that not only was I using it for recruiting, but I was using it for the community, automation and controls. I really liked getting back into it, wanted to sink my teeth into it, meet some people, build some relationships, conversations. So I was forced into LinkedIn and getting as much of it as I could out of it. And it has been, that's been the big game changer for me. I don't know if my internet connection may have cut out. Can you guys hear me?
We've
Yes.
heard you well. I think your image cut out a little bit, but
Okay.
it froze, but the voice came through. No
All
problem
right,
there.
great.
And so,
So,
fast
yeah, go
fast
ahead.
forwarding to today, I think there's a lot of really interesting movements in the manufacturing automation space specifically. I was curious to maybe get your opinion on what you're seeing when it comes to the current talent pool, and maybe expand about, again, like some of the numbers that I've heard is that manufacturing is projected to grow like 30% this year. I don't know if you have any other, like, maybe statistics, metrics. What are employers kind of looking to hire when it comes to like the demand curve?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, automation as a whole is really burgeoning right now. I've seen it. I'm trying to think of any industry now. O&G is its own kind of animal, if you will. They've got some regulatory, and COVID has hurt them, and so they're still trying to find their way back. But that's an up and down industry, anyways. But all other industries are really trying to squeeze automation and the potential of it now. Before COVID, automation was talked about, was being used as a tool. The problems were really selling it to C-suites, what the ROI was, getting them to buy in. But now with COVID, it has really pushed the digital transformation, as far as, sending employees home that didn't need to be there. What do we do now? Remote work has pushed a lot. We used to have a non-remote workforce. Everybody was in the office. Well, now, that we've been out for a year, some
We're losing Jordan just a little bit, I guess. That's interesting. It's like the image freezes and then catches up at some point. Sorry.
Yeah.
Continue. I think you're back.
I think I'm back now. Yeah. So yeah, automation is booming. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So automation is booming. It seems like a lot of people corporations that had money to spend on CapEx were holding on to it. And now that we're starting to come out of the fog, return to normal, whatever you want to use as far as COVID goes, it's on. We've got this money, we need to spend it. We've seen ways that we can improve our efficiency, lower our costs, be more, or I already said efficient. But let's look at remote workspaces, having people being more digital presence. It's really pushed things forward. So you're seeing it. I've seen on all fronts. People are looking at CapEx, legacy retrofits, whatever they can do in automation. We're really pushing the bounds, starting to.
Are you seeing like a specific segment of jobs? And I guess what I mean by that is, like engineering level roles, technician level roles that are still, because there's a nuance, right? If you have to be at the plant versus you can make them a little bit more remote, maybe more management, like MES type of roles. Like, what are you like, or are you seeing just the entire market being growing, like, I guess, equally, or is there maybe more demand for certain skill sets than others?
Yeah, it's growing equally, all the way down technician level, operators, but even into the engineers, controls engineers, automation engineers. MES is going crazy. Yeah, I mean, there really isn't anything that isn't moving right now. Like I said, anything automation, we want to know about it. What kind of experience do you have and what can you bring to the table for our automation presence, whether that is an end user or a system integrator? And going back to what you were talking about as far as being on a plant, plant jobs are still there and you're still going to need to be at the plant for some things. Now, whether we're instituting more technologies with alarms, we can have somebody remotely operating it. And then if alarm comes on and we need you at the plant, we can move to things like that. So if we can make it remote, if we can be flexible, we're looking at that. Some things aren't just yet, but there's a lot of that going on.
And as you see this growth, right, I'm assuming it's going to be continuing for a foreseeable future. And my initial kind of thought is that employers will run into, I guess, hit a wall, a metaphorical wall that will kind of stop them from getting the talent they need, either on the floor or in the offices. And so what kind of challenges do you see them like face? And I guess how can, I would say, like, a lot of our listeners are looking to maybe change themselves in a way so that they can adapt for those changes. Like, how can they also like maybe adapt themselves in terms of like skills, in terms of like different flexibilities? Like, what do you see changing in that sense?
I got the first and last part. Can you give me the middle part again? I cut out on my end. Sorry.
Well, so I'm curious, I guess, how the employers are going to adapt to hitting a metaphorical wall at a certain point in time, right? How are they gonna like, or what kind of challenges, first of all, they're gonna face, and how they're gonna change themselves, but also how can individuals kind of looking into the future 2-3 years ahead prepare themselves for what's gonna happen in the market? And obviously, I think it's just hypothesis at this point, but I'm curious, like, what you're seeing, like what kind of shifts are you seeing in that sense?
Are you talking more flexibility as far as remote work goes forward, or just hiring overall?
Well, let's start with like the company side, right? So companies are slowly running out of people that they can hire, right? Like that's kind of the assumption of a growth rate.
Yeah.
Like what are they going to have to change? You know, if there's a manufacturing plant, whether it is like in Canada, Indiana, Florida, Quebec, whatever, and as they bring in this automation, they bring in robotics, they bring in packaging cells, they bring in like new production lines, and they just can't hire enough people to maintain or support those initiatives. Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah, great question. Glad you brought that up. And that is kind of what I've observed is plans like that. We're upgrading new automation lines, robotics, new PLCs, hardware, software, whatever. They all look at implementations, phases, who's going to do it, how much it's going to cost. And whoever the decision maker says, okay, let's do it. And then all of that is done. And at the end, we've delivered the system. And if we're an integrator, we're going to go away now. Maybe we come back for service, something, but you're going to have in-house talent working your automation products. And that's the last thing that is thought about in this process, as I have seen through manufacturers. Mm-hmm. It's all the hard decision of who's going to work on it, number crunching, can we afford it, the budget, months of meetings, and then, okay, let's do it. But it's never, because it's always kind of talked about the talent at the end. It's like, oh, well, we need people to run this. Okay, we'll tell HR, let's create a few job descriptions and we'll hire somebody. Yeah, right. That does not work, especially with automation right now. Just as you said, to kind of make it easy for the listeners and anybody that's out there, let's just make it the number simple. Let's say there's 50 controls and automation people in the United States, and there's 100 companies with 100 openings now. Those 50 people are going to be hired in a couple of weeks, a month, whatever. But then you're going to have 50 companies with 50 openings and nobody to hire. What are you going to do then? Because you can't take all that equipment back. There's no refund, right? You're not going to go back that way. You've got to find somebody. So we're going to go out and we're going to recruit somebody that can.
We lost Jordan again. I think he might do this on purpose. He's like, I'm about to say something really good, and then I'm just going to meme my way through it and hope that I sound smart.
Can you hear me?
We've got you back. So
okay.
You were about to make a really good point about how, what happens. You cannot return equipment and software.
Yeah. So you got to have somebody working that. And so if there's no automation or controls engineers, what's the next level? What are we going to do? Do we go with someone that's an electrician and wants to get into controls? Do we go for our machine operators? Anybody that shows inclination to wanting to learn this stuff? What do we do? So I've seen a couple of companies that have been forward thinking and have started and seen that and are training their own people. Bringing in entry-level people and really training them up their way, how they do approach projects, their way of working it. And I think that's the best thing to do right now, because we're not going to be able to replace the workforce that's retiring now and into 10 years, the baby boomer generation. And there's not enough people going through college and associate technical degrees with experience. So when the cupboard's bare, what's the next best thing? And that's what a lot of people are, need to ask themselves and look downstream 5-10 years and say, what is this? How are we going to fix this? That's a big thing for this industry, because the talent is limited. And as automation grows and the demand grows, there's only a finite amount of resources.
And it's a big challenge, right? Because it's like a catch-22 or a prisoner's dilemma, so to speak, right? Because if there's going to be a company that invests money into bringing all these people up to speed, then in a sense you don't have to, because then you can just hire those people once they've, been educated, whether it is through the company or through a college, whatever, versus if you spend your own money, then it becomes really difficult for you to retain those people who are now getting the offers from other employers. And I think that too is like an important topic to discuss, especially in this current environment, because what companies are doing, like you said, they can probably take someone who's inclined or is at least like interested in controls automation, bring them up to speed, which can take sometimes, from my experience, like a few years, right? And so 2 years down the road, you've invested all this money into an individual, and they're starting to get offers through LinkedIn from different employers. And so that too, I think, is maybe an important discussion. I don't know if you you probably talk to your customers about this, but how do you retain people once you have hired them, I guess? And I would be curious to hear like what your thoughts are, like on that standpoint. How can they change so that they can retain people better?
Yeah. Excellent point again. Great job on the questions, Vlad. Yeah, I mean, so now I'm going to bring in people that I'm going to train, and I'm going to invest my own money and bring them up. And, whether it's a year, couple of years, they're now, an experience, we'll use that word loosely, but they're recruitable engineering talent. So somebody's going to call and try to poach your guys. So yes, you want to be proactive. If you're going to bring people in and train them up, you've got to have a program designed to retain them. And that's the hard part, is because human beings are not, they're variable. Their equations always change, right? Their needs, their wants, what happened in this day, what's happening in family.
We have briefly lost Jordan. And while we're waiting to get Jordan back, I will make the comment of one of the important things, both to hire the best talent and to retain the best talent, is to be an employer of choice. And I feel like we've kind of danced around that a little bit. And that is kind of the holistic view of what are we going to do to make sure that we bring the best people in? And part of that is going to be how can we build a talent process, a hiring process, in order to hire, we want to be the people that can hire one of the 50 people in the market that has the skills that we need. But beyond just doing that, we also want to make sure that we've got people in the pipeline, either internally or externally, so that they can learn those skills, as both of you guys have talked about. Someone doesn't become a controls engineer specialist or an MES specialist or a machine specialist overnight. You can't sleep on a stack of books and learn it through osmosis. Though I'm pretty sure I've tried that in the past, and I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, it unfortunately does not work. You cannot be you don't get to learn that through osmosis. And so one of the important things is for a employer to be forward looking, make sure that they can hire talent that fits within their environment, and make sure that they're training people. And if they're providing good training and continuing education opportunities, then they're going to also be able to provide a career path for those folks who want to continue to stay within the company. And maybe you start as a senior controls engineer, and at some point you want to be VP of engineering for the facility or for the zone or for the company. If you're not being provided with a career path to get you to where you want to go as a controls engineer, you're going to leave to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think we had this interesting comment also on one of the previous episodes with Huck, right? Like where he talked about Grantech's vision. And I think he mentioned a very critical point. And I'm curious, I guess, Jordan, you must be facing this as well. But I think in many ways, due to what we see in, very glamorous companies like Facebook, Google, and what have you, it almost seems like the prize is having that paid dinner or having like a foosball table at the recreation room, where I really think that what people are looking for, like Dave said, is a clear career path. They're looking for some help, right? Like, or a mentor that has been in that position and is able to kind of aid them in times of like difficulty, right? Like as an engineer, there's going to be always challenges. So you always want that kind of mentor figure, I feel, in a company. And it's very important for employers, I feel, to be as like employee focused as they are like customer focused, right? Like, and I think that's the really important piece, right? It's not, like I said, the giveaways or the the random events that are happening. It's really kind of a multitude of those initiatives.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the ping pong tables and such. I mean, whatever,
I mean, it's
right?
still being used. Like, it's still sold. Like, you could see it on, job
Yeah,
postings that, well, we have a ping pong table, and like,
right.
I don't know if it's ironically sold in job descriptions or.
But Vlad, you hit it. You hit it on the head. That's what most people want is an employer who's employee focused as well. Not only just customer focused, we have customer focused and to be able to invoice and make money and pay you, but we're also on you. What is it that you want? What is it that you desire to get out of your career, and how can we help you? And companies need to be not afraid of losing people if you're going to grow them. Sometimes people are going to outgrow your company for organic reasons, and you're not going to have the fit for them to go to their next step of their career,
Mm-hmm.
but another company will. So always be encouraging. Employees love that stuff. If they feel like you have their best interests in mind, they will bend over backwards for you. So instead of the pool tables and cool offices, call me in for a 15-minute meeting and just ask me how's it going. How's your goals? How do you think it's going here? Show some interest in me. That will go so much further than a ping pong table at break time, right?
Yeah, it's surprising how rare those conversations are, from my experience at least. Like, it's extremely rare. We had a question in LinkedIn, David. I don't know if you saw it,
I
from
did see it.
Bonita.
It was a very good question. Let me get back to it from Bonita. She was saying, as someone looking for positions in automation as a beginner technician, is there a recommendation to avoid a company that's not thought that far in advance to avoid layoffs? Like, how can you tell if the company is a good company and is a company of choice and is going to protect you for the long term versus they're going to bring you aboard, but as soon as there are bad times, you're going to be the last one in is the first one out.
Yeah. Well, sometimes a company is a company. It's an individual basis. You never know what you're signing on. Even if it's a reputable company that's been in for 100 years, you've got 5 friends that have worked there for 20, and they're like, this is the greatest place. Okay, great. And you sign on. Well, you had a different experience, right? But as far as, with layoffs go, you can kind of look at some tea leaves as far as what industry are you getting in? Is it up and is it down? Like with automotive, sometimes there's dips and there can be layoffs. We've seen what happened in O&G going up and down. Food and beverage has been kind of COVID proof. There's a lot of people that have done really well in during COVID in food and beverage. Paper and pulp did really well. So you really kind of want to look at your industry more than the company and see how, you can always look at the company's history as well. Talk to people that have worked there. Those are usually the best things. Networking, talking with people. But, at the end of the day, you can only do so much research, and then you've got to kind of have to make your educated opinion and guess on that.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think asking the right questions, obviously you don't always have the opportunity to talk to people, within the company before you kind of interview, and you have a very limited amount of time.
Yep.
But I feel I guess, like, one question I personally always ask is, like, why are you hiring for this specific position, right? And if the answer is something along the lines of, like, the last 3 people left this position in, like, the last 6 months, then there's, like, at least, like, some, like, red flag that kind of tells me, like, there must be something that they're not fully disclosing to me, right?
Right.
Whether it is because, like, we're expanding, because of growth, we're looking to, like, establish a new team. Those are usually kind of the very positive answers. And of course they can, to a certain extent, they can hide the information, but usually I like, people are honest and will tell you, like, what the reason for that is.
Yeah. And to go further in that question, to answer that, don't be afraid of joining a company if they're, laying off, and what that might do to your resume, because those things can be easily explained and understood and accepted within the industry. We all know that there's ups and downs, hiring managers, in different industries. So that's That's okay. The most important part, I would say, is to be working in automation and controls right now. Get that experience that you can show on a resume. Nobody wants to work somewhere and then be laid off 6 months later, but that would be better to have that experience than nothing on your resume at all. Automation
absolutely
is growing.
And I think, to your point, Jordan, I think people also understand that in many aspects, it's not up to, how to say this, it's not the decision of the technicians or engineers to, let's say, close down a facility, right? Like I've seen plant closures, and typically they're passed down because somebody like way up high made the decision that this plant is not profitable or what have you. So I think everybody understands that it's not the line technician who's been putting in 30-day shifts at a time and then getting like one weekend off because there's like no productivity that's responsible for the closure, right?
Yep.
Like you said, I think it's easily explainable, at least.
Yes.
No, perfect. And so we have a interesting question that can take us down a couple of ruts from Mohammed. He wants to know if you, or I suppose we, think that the European Union, the US, and Canada have enough qualified people to fill all of the vacancies that they have.
Yeah, I mean, speaking as far as EU and Canada, not as qualified to answer that. Most of mine, all of mine, is done here in the U.S. so far. No, not at least for the U.S. We just don't have enough, and that's, to speak more on that, with automation booming right now and all the hiring, expanding going on, growing teams, all that. And we talked about this earlier. It's going to come to a time where, hey, there's just really not any other talent available.
Yeah.
These guys aren't moving, or, hey, I found a group of guys, but they've all been recruited and moved to a new place within the last 6 months.
And it would take a lot of money to get them to move. And so I guess kind of the follow-up question to that becomes a question that I know I talk to a lot of people about. I get a lot of messages about, of people looking to move into those countries. So I guess in your experience, Jordan, have you found lots of, or many, sponsorship opportunities in the general automation sector to help people move into the US?
So that's a good question. I could talk a lot about that. I'll try to condense it as much. Sponsorships and automation happen more so on like OPTs, which is the couple of years that, let's say somebody from India came over here for their master's. They're graduating with their master's. They have OPT for several years that they can work on as a contractor. And then there's also the H-1B, which is for more permanent. This is an employee we want to hold on to. We're going to go into the application process, the lottery process, to try and get their green card so they can stay with us, get residency here. As far as that goes, in automation, I have not really seen a whole lot of H-1B opportunities. And OPT, I've seen some, but they're hard to come by. So I would say, the U.S. can use your skills if you have the experience, if you can get in here. And that's what I mean. If you can get here, you can live here, you can work here, obviously. Can you hear me? Did I lose you?
You okay, kind of jumbled up. It's going to be some interesting audio that Vlad gets on the back end of this.
So yeah, basically, if you can get in the U.S. And live here and work here, I can work with you depending on your experience. But yeah, I mean, if you're in India or another country, South Africa, South America, and you're asking, hey, how do I get in here? I don't have a lot of opportunities for you, unfortunately. The way that's more of a custom or an immigration issue, I think that we would have to go down and talk about that. But when the talent is all used up, American talent, and we have people here that can work on OPT or H-1Bs, I think we're going to need to look at that and opening up and becoming, less restrictive there, because we're going to need to use that talent here.
Yeah, I would agree with your statements, Jordan. And I would say that especially on the integrator side, there are not many integrators that are large enough to go down the process of, dealing with all of those immigrations. So I've dealt with a couple of specifically engineering companies who I won't name on here because I don't want them to get absolutely hammered with people. But those companies specifically have worked with generally engineers who have just finished their bachelor's or their master's degree, and they were still in the US. And because they were still in the US, it was easier to kind of like swap over the visa from student visa to like H-1B or whatever that looks like as the process to go down sponsorship. I don't know many people who have successfully, without a lot of experience and a very in-demand specific skill set, made the transition from basically just about anywhere into working into the US full-time without, again, a large amount of experience.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. That has been
We got another question in LinkedIn that's interesting. So how easy is it to move industries in automation? And I guess like that's like, before I leave it to you, I feel like that's a little pet peeve of mine as well. Like, during interviews where, my initial background was in medical devices, and then I transitioned to food and bev. But even though I would talk to recruiters and they, for whatever reason, would be, turned off if they're in a different industry than what I was in. And I feel as an engineer in primarily automation controls, I think it would be just as difficult for me, or just as much of a learning curve for me to transfer to a completely different, let's say, food process than it would be for me to go to, let's say, oil and gas. Like, for sure, there's nuances, and I understand that, but I feel that the learning curve isn't that big unless you're, again, becoming like a process engineer where you really need to understand, the intricacies of the process. What are your thoughts on that? And I guess, like, how easy is it to move between industries?
Yeah, done it plenty of time. A lot of ONG to food and bev. But yeah, to your question, I think if you were talking to the engineer, the automation or controls engineer, they'll say, yeah, I'm gonna have a little learning curve, but I can figure it out. I'm an engineer, right?
Right.
But I think once we get more to hiring managers, directors, they tend to yeah, it's like, well, he's an O&G. How will he do in food and bev? I don't think that carries over. Or automotive to food and beverage, or food and beverage to whatever, medical device, you name it, FDA. And I would have to, there's outliers, right? But in general, no. This guy knows, he's an automation or controls guy. He knows his ones and zeros. He knows how to program. Sure, there might be some new stuff that we learn, but the ramp up time is not going to be that much. And you're still going to have an automation and controls engineer that's going to be able to do the job for you.
So you would say it's easy to transition, or you think that it's going to be hard because of those gatekeepers?
It should be easier than what it is.
Okay.
What I should say. But yeah, in the real world, I haven't seen anybody that, of course, I had some good clients to work with that were open and said, yeah, I don't really mind. We can work with that. And they were open, and they benefited from that process because they kind of, well, I don't know. And we did it, and they're like, yeah, it worked out great, seamlessly. And then I was able to go to that industry and get more from them because there wasn't as many food and beverage. So yeah, I mean, transitioning from industries, look at the industry you want to transition into, see what software and hardware they're using. If it's in Siemens, like in food and beverage, you were saying process, batches, right? How to control those. Are we doing more function charts and function blocks? Maybe we can use structured text a little bit better. So that's where I go back. If you want to be a good automation controls person, learn all of your languages and learn more than one platform. And that's definitely going to help you transition a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you to a large extent. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Like I said, it's really strange to me that they're not looking at the positives, right? I think like every industry, again, like I want to reference a little bit to Sean Terrell, who comes primarily from oil and gas. they do things in a very different way based, again, my understanding and my discussions with him, than, the way things we do in food and bev. And having kind of cross pollination, if you want, like someone who goes from that industry to, let's say, like food and bev, it can bring a lot of like different ideas, and just like at the bare minimum, like thoughts on how we can like add some of the pluses to the way we do things in food and bev versus like the negatives of him having to ramp up to understanding how things are done. So there's for sure like pluses and minuses, just like anything else. But I think it's important to focus on the pluses, right? And hopefully during the interview, if you're given a chance, obviously, to speak to someone, you can articulate that as the candidate, right? Like that, it's not that I'm going to be a burden to your company because I'm going to have to learn all this, but I'm going to be a plus because like I've done like this, and this that can hopefully be reapplied in this industry, right?
Exactly. At my core, I am an automation and controls engineer. No matter if I'm doing it in oil and gas, monitoring tank levels, flow, or if I'm coming into a food process with recipes and we're blending to make a final product, I'm still trying to help you automate something.
Yeah,
and I have that base knowledge.
Speaking of the different, you mentioned the different PLC brands and platforms. That's a very controversial, to some extent, topic, as you see in our community. There's a lot of questions over the last few weeks. You've seen the LinkedIn, poll, I feel, every other day, asking which platform do you prefer. They just put out one of those. And I guess I'm curious to kind of like, again, I'm not completely following, the numbers of what you see in the field, but I feel that it's probably a lot more representative by, the employers. And since you're seeing what kind of people they're looking for, maybe you have a better estimate of, the current splits. Again, maybe the top, like there's Allen Bradley, Siemens, but then there's like Omron, Mitsubishi, there's some Opto 22, and then there's some MES platforms coming into play as well, right? So Ignition, Sepasoft, Tatsoft, and a few others. So I'm curious, like, if you can maybe paint us a picture of the landscape and how you see things like changing in the next couple of years, if you have maybe a thought on that as well.
Yeah, obviously, being in North America, Allen Bradley is the king, is the market share. So if you're going to be in automation or controls, learn Allen Bradley, Rockwell Suite. Do that. Start there. That's going to be your best bet. Next one I would say is Siemens. Okay, so Allen Bradley, I've heard, I'm not an engineer. I don't sit down and program different softwares, but I don't know the ins and outs of what they do. I'm not sitting down programming these every day. So I ask, and I'm listening to engineer tell me these things. Allen Bradley is there, learn that. But I've heard a lot, maybe sometimes their support and pricing. I've heard that has kind of, I don't know, more grumbles that I've observed. So, whenever you see that, that kind of makes it to where, hey, these guys are king, they're dominant, but maybe there's some room for somebody else to make it in. And I feel like Siemens is trying to do that along with some other people. Siemens, I have seen it's still clearly a number two, but they're gaining traction, especially in automotive, very well used in food and beverage. Like I said, the function charts, function blocks, and recipes and batches. There's some really cool things you can do with that. So Siemens is starting to get more of a market share over here, obviously doing really well in other countries in Europe. So they kind of play in their major sandbox over there and try to get some North America market share, whereas Allen Bradley can, trying to do the exact opposite thing. But the other ones that you said are kind of interesting too. I've seen some polls and of course, you've got your Omrons, Mitsus. There's even some smaller ones that are made, out there like Toyo Puck. Toyota uses their own. Those are always popular. But what I've seen back off has been one I've seen gaining traction. What was the other one? I'm trying to think.
Maybe Automation Direct.
Automation
Direct
Direct's always
is
been
good.
there. I've always heard of them in colleges, training. A lot of people have that. They're very similar to Allen Bradley. So a lot of people are cutting their teeth on Automation Directs. But Beckoff, B&R is gaining some popularity coming over here. Lupe up in the Northwest has a lot of B&R people. They've leveraged that really well. But I do see it gaining here as well. There's some new technologies out there. We'll see as they come apart. They've got a lot to work with coming up against Allen Bradley and Siemens, obviously, with the big boys. So how much market share are they trying to cut in, and how much competition do they have for that market share? That'll be interesting to see how it goes. But some of these smaller companies that engineers are getting to play with, they're liking it. They're liking some different techniques, different features that they have. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
Based on that, I guess I'm curious. Let me formulate like a concise question. So if you're looking to enter automation, right, and you're, again, I would place myself in my own shoes, right? As an electrical engineer, I had zero exposure to PLCs through my university, right? If I'm looking to land a job, and perhaps it is on Allen Bradley.
Sorry to cut
Did you hear any of that?
You were just getting ready to say.
Okay.
So
No,
Jordan
just
sounds
getting ready to
absolutely
say the
drunk
question.
right now.
Sorry.
Let me start over. I guess I'm going to have to keep it short.
Said that you
Okay.
were trying to get a
As an electrical engineer, I had zero exposure to PLCs in college, right?
Yeah.
If I'm looking to get into automation, perhaps on the Allen Bradley platform, and I really cannot afford, the hardware and the software, like, what are your thoughts on learning on like a different platform as demonstrating my capabilities, and then going to interviews, talking to somebody like you to land an entry-level job as an automation engineer? Like, what are your thoughts on like these different platforms and just cross transferability of skills?
Yeah. So the skills transfer, I would see it's more in the languages that we're teaching, whether it's in ladder logic, function blocks, charts, structured text. Seeing those are more transferable. When we talk to a pure programmer or coder, whatever terminology you want to use, it doesn't matter what brand it is. It's all ones and zeros when you get down to it. And I'm going to understand it. I'm going to play around with it. This might be new. This function might be unfamiliar, but I'm going to get it. Automation Direct, again, they've been a lot more affordable, and they've been using college courses, and I've heard a lot of people say it's very similar. So with Allen Bradley being the dominant one, seeing if you can get Automation Direct, start working with stuff like that's cheaper, great. And even to a further point, if you can't get your hands on the hardware, if you're an EE or anything and learning PLCs without the hardware, such as yourself, Vlad, when I got to know you, you had several courses through Udemy. There's other platforms out there, people that offer those kinds of trainings that are very robust and affordable. That's a great way. So if you can't, you're an EE, your college class isn't offering it, you can't get in, to learn these kinds of things, network with your local system integrator, see if you can get in there, on an intern, get in there after hours, get to know people. And if you can't get those kinds of opportunities, go online, YouTube, Solus PLC. I don't know if are you doing is that still through Udemy or through Solus?
Mostly through Solus, but I guess like it's always been a question on my mind, which platform to use. And one of my like goals for this year is to figure out a more, how to say it, accessible way to help people. Because I think at the end of the day, you still want to buy a piece of hardware to maybe have something tangible to touch.
Yeah.
You can certainly learn a lot from emulators, but I just feel like PLC specifically, if you haven't actually put in an input, you're just missing maybe the experience.
Yeah.
And I'm exploring a couple of different options. I'm looking at Siemens, like Automation Direct, Opto 22, just like platforms that are a little bit easier to digest in terms of cost. But at the same time, like my concerns are, if people are learning on those platforms, how are they seen by recruiters once those people hit the market, right? Because like I'm not gonna tell a recruiter that I know Alan Bradley when I've clearly only studied on, let's say, a comment on code assist, for example, on like a Raspberry Pi, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, like, listen, I've learned PLC programming, I've learned ladder logic, I've explored these different functionalities through code assist, and here are some of my projects. And it's just because I couldn't afford the hardware and the software. And so I'm a little bit concerned, like how the employers might perceive that, is there going to be a greater barrier? And of course there will be, right? But at the same time,
I would much rather prefer you having your hands on that hardware before I hire you. But that's a perfect world, and we don't live in a perfect world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the scenario you just described is exactly what you would want to tell an employer on an interview. Of all, hey, here's my projects, here's what I've done, here's what I have done. I know that there's an obstacle as far as getting my hands on hardware due to cost, availability, but here's what I have done to try and make up for that. Showing those efforts go a long way, especially with a hiring manager.
Yeah, I agree.
But
we had another comment.
You bring up another good point with the adaptability, the use of learning a platform. Siemens, Alan Bradley, Automation Direct, whoever. With the future, when we don't have these 4-year and 2-year degrees, we need to make these platforms easier to learn, adapt, so we can have people programming quicker, if that makes sense.
We have a comment. I guess one of the big brands we forgot is Schneider. So Schneider, I have actually seen a lot of their PLCs across different facilities, even in the US. I wouldn't say that they're the dominant, but I'm sure like top 5 for sure. Like Schneider has and really good drives as well, right? It's not just a PLC suite, but I've seen both. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like it's a challenge, right? Like it's between like learning a platform. I think we all somewhat understand that a competent engineer or technician, what have you, should be able to transfer those skills. But at the same time, there is a certain learning curve, to get familiar with the platform. And that maybe is a good transition to our next kind of segment that I wanted to talk about as well. So, Dave,
let's hold up for a sec, Vlad. We've had a ton of absolutely fantastic mentions here in the chat that I feel like we need to get on here. Sandro, everyone's favorite project or product manager over at Festo, said it's our job to make automation and manufacturing cool and interesting so the younger generations are interested and we don't have to struggle years from now to find talent. We don't have to fake it. Automation is cool and exciting. All of us engineers have gotten excited watching an LED light up for the first time. And that actually reminded me, I remember growing up playing with breadboards, playing with all those little wires. My little cousin, when she was 4 or 5 a few years ago, my parents bought her a kit. And these things are like, they've got plugs on the end and you can plug these things in. Her launching the spinning fan blade up in the air like 20 times in a row is probably my favorite video anyone has ever sent me. She was like screaming with joy, right? Like, and that, to Sandro's point, is the important part of what we're doing here. And then we had a really good conversation in the comments with Muhammad and Gabriel talking about remote work, remote commissioning outside of a variety of different countries. I think that's a fantastic conversation. We may need to save that till the end. Vlad, I don't know if you were on the manufacturing happy hour that we had in the beginning of the pandemic when we talked about like remote FATs. Were you part of that?
I might have been. I recall something like that happening. Yes.
So it was interesting. There are a bunch of different technologies that we've seen people use, and I think that might be a good topic of conversation to bring up for another episode.
What was the consensus, really quickly? I honestly don't remember,
the consensus was we kind of need to go that way, but technology doesn't necessarily exist. But there are like RealWear goggles. There are now like a bunch of other software and other different opportunities that you can do. But at the end of the day, generally, someone always needs to be on site to make sure that the stuff is set up and to do kind of live troubleshooting. This is hopefully reduce the number of people who have to be who have to be on site as part of that.
Yeah. We have a comment / really short question on from YouTube. The person says, "Hey guys, great show. I just got a job with Rockwell Automation as an automation controls technician. Do you guys think I should invest in CompTIA Plus, Network Plus, Security Plus certifications?" What are your thoughts, Jordan, on those avenues?
Say what certifications?
So it's CompTIA Plus, Network Plus, Security Plus. But I guess like just to generalize, like different. I think these are like cybersecurity network. Type
Networking.
of certifications. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you look at those as a recruiter for when you're looking at people?
Definitely when we start to get into the networking and communication protocol, cybersecurity.
But what about for controls automation personnel? Like, is that something that adds value?
I haven't seen it yet. But it's nothing that will hurt you. But it won't be, it could be something where you're because you got to focus, and they've got a job for you to do, right? And they want to make sure you can do that. So if they have some background stuff that's going on, some issues, or they've been thinking about hiring someone, you come in and do that for them, that's an added bonus. But yeah, I just haven't seen it in a controls and automation perspective be really beneficial. But and no means am I saying don't get them. They're just not a conversation mover in those particular positions as of now.
Gotcha. Dave, any other things you wanted to plug in before I bombard Jordan with another series? Once we start, it's like.
No. So we're going. So I would say specifically like on all the networking certifications, if you can get the company to pay for them, it's not bad to have in the back pocket. There is a whole new burgeoning kind of realm in automation of like the OT network engineer. And they want people who understand networking, but also understand automation, because the IT side, the carpeted side, if you will, is very different from the uncarpeted side, the OT plant floor side. And so because that, we are certainly seeing, some benefit to that. And it's certainly, if that's something that you're interested in getting into, then, and especially if you can get your employer to pay for them, part of that continuing education, if you can show something substantial, that's never a bad thing if it interests you.
Right. Yeah. Down the line, if you want to verge into OT and networking, it's going to play great. And like Dave said, if you can get your employer to pay for it, awesome. And that kind of goes off into, you were asking earlier, any certain sectors. And one sector I've seen blowing up is the OT ICS world and automation. And that kind of gives us, the two people that we're looking for, either an automation engineer that knows some cybersecurity and can kind of do that and dabbles in it, versus we need somebody that's OT and IT specific. But we do need.
Building the suspense. Sandra said we should call it building the suspense. So we're building the suspense as to what you need.
I have a feeling everybody like checks their own connection, once this happens.
I did.
If I was like a viewer, then I'd be like, oh my God, is my internet down?
So Sam had mentioned Sam had mentioned in the comments that we weren't saying anything. So Jordan, please continue with your life-altering thoughts.
Basically, I agree with you, Dave, as scary as that is. Yeah, if you want to get those, go for them. If you can get your employer to pay for them, awesome. And if you want to get into more of the networking side, cybersecurity, it's going to pay your dividends down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious how, that side of I think there's very few discussions about the specifics of cybersecurity. I think everybody kind of wants something. And I remember now that Dave had launched a a question on this, right? And again, from my experience, I've seen a lot of conversations about it at the like executive slash upper management level. But when it comes to the plant floor, I think there's just a lot of things that are like, I don't want to say like natively difficult, but don't play nicely with, you know, how you would want it to be implemented, so to speak, right? There's a lot of how to say it, like necessary corner cutting, so to speak, to get the automation systems running that do not comply maybe with the cybersecurity practices that you've got today. And I think like those are very complicated conversations if people don't have like a very good understanding of the factory floor.
Yeah, like
So-
one instance, patching, right? If you do patching on the IT, it's much different than down on the plant floor.
Yep.
Right.
You know, that's
I mean-
one bar room brawl sometimes. Not playing nice.
Absolutely.
It's in clients. Am I looking for? Is that your question?
What type of client? Who is your ideal client? Who should reach out for help on either side?
From there, let's move into a phone or on site with the decision makers, and after that, let's make a decision. Here's what we know we're going to have to pay. We're going to have a discussion about that. So when it comes time to pay somebody $100,000, I don't want a client that's going, oh, okay, well, I think they can take this at 85. Well, no, they're not, because they've got 4 or 5 other offers and the lowest one is at 95. So I'm going to go through all that with the client, right? And if they know what they're getting into and they let me help them, they're going to end up with a speedy, efficient process that gets them the talent that they need to move their operation forward. So when I talk to clients and they are not ready, it's a jumbled process. It takes a long time to get feedback. Those are not the companies that I want to work for, because those are the companies the candidates aren't impressed by.
Mm-hmm.
They want to see your job process. The best companies do a phone interview and then move to a final interview, whether that's Teams, whether that's on site. I'm going to fly you in, or you're going to drive over here. You're going to meet with us, spend a few hours. Great. And by tomorrow, we're going to have a decision whether we're going to offer you or not. And if we are going to offer you, we're not going to beat around the bush. We know what it takes. Here's what it is.
I like it.
I'm looking for it.
I wish that's how my processes went when I was interviewing. So
yes. And that's always where the work comes in, right? That's where you've got to work with your client and develop them, work with them as much as they might be working with you. Maybe they don't know the best process or the best way to attract this kind of talent. Whereas I do this all day long. And if you let me help you and guide you there, I can get you there. But the hard part right now in getting talent is getting your name and your company out there to know anything about you. I can bring that to different talent where your marketing isn't going. So when I go out there and I find these passive candidates who are ready to move on, know that what I'm doing, and let's be buttoned up, let's be prepared, and let's move. But that's always the hard part.
right.
Can be.
No,
Jordan, where
beautiful.
can candidates perhaps find some of the postings or the jobs you're currently working on so that they could reach out if there's a match?
Yeah, currently I do everything through LinkedIn.
Okay.
So search me, Jordan Humphreys, on LinkedIn. Connect with me, follow me. I'm one of the more open people. If you're in automation controls, I'll connect with you. Let's talk. If I can't represent you for whatever reason, there's some people I can't represent. There's when clients hire me, they pay me. I'm not cheap. They pay me a lot of money for people that they don't have access to. So if you're still like on the lower side of technician, just getting started out, sometimes I can't work with you because clients are not going to pay me a fee for somebody that's beginning. They're going to look more to, I don't want to spend, a recruiter's fee on that kind of talent yet.
Right.
So yeah, it's for whatever reason, if I can't help you out directly, I want to help you out indirectly. Whether that's, hey, you need to connect with this person, or hey, you need to talk to this person over here. They've been able to help you out, give you some resources to help further out your career, whether that's Solus PLC. Hey, I've always been wanting to learn PLC and Allen Brad. Hey, I've got the resources for you, several of them, right? People that I know, just trying to help you out. So connect with me, start a conversation. There's people I've had a conversation with that I haven't been able to help for a couple of years due to different circumstances. I try to be valuable in that way. I'm not going to just say, oh, here's Vlad, here's his resume. I'm not going to be able to help him. I'm never talking to him again. No, I want to be able to be there and help you, not only place you in a new job, but be there as a resource, not only for you, but for the community as a whole.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I guess I know very few people who are willing to go like above and beyond to that extent, right? And I think that's very appreciated by the candidates, and ultimately allows you to make those matches, if not, today, then down the road.
Yeah.
But,
and that going back to the original part, when I started this, I wanted it to be different, and I wanted to have the community and promote the community and make it tighter, make it better. I think it's a perfect time to do it in automation, and to push this community forward. It's bigger than me. How can I help the automation community as a whole? So I got to try and give back, and that's part of my mission as well.
I do want to mention, we'll have the links in case you're like watching this or listening, and you don't know how to spell Jordan's name in full. We'll have links like in the description or, in the footnotes for the episode, so you can find them there as well.
Cool. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Do you have anything else, or shall I wrap up, Vlad?
Do it, Dave.
Okay, let's do it. So we're going to make sure to tell everyone listening all of the things that we tell the folks watching live at the beginning. So if you are watching, please remember to hit that like, comment, and subscribe buttons on LinkedIn, YouTube, and all your normal podcast platforms. As a semi-professional podcaster, I am supposed to ask people to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment as to how long you think it takes Jordan to blow dry his hair. Because that apparently changes some algorithmic stuff, and we might get some more listens. But beyond that, if you guys are on LinkedIn, please like and follow Manufacturing Hub with Dave and Vlad, which is where all the events come out. And then we are online at manufacturinghub.live. Until next time, we will see you guys just about every Wednesday at 6:00 East Coast time.
Thank you again, Jordan. Really appreciate.
Thank you again, guys, for having me on, and all of the people that participated. If you got any questions, hit me up.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much. Until next week, we will see you then.